Dan Walkow is C-Bank Capital. He is a specialist in U.S.-Canadian cross-border money movement, legal money movement, RSPs, IRAs, 401ks, Canadian pension plans, RIFs. He can do it all no matter where you are in North America, for the record. So, Dan, you have a client who's been 20 years in California, moved down there, and what does he have? What does he
Well,
do?
the issue was he just didn't realize that he had to report anything.
Yep.
So now, I guess...
I've got to ask you a question. Do you know if he had somebody doing his tax return?
I didn't ask. It was just a recent call. We didn't get into details.
Okay.
But he just said, he phoned me up and said, can you help me? I think I'm in trouble.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how much trouble. And I don't know all the details. But I guess just for the record, I mean, if we have a case like this where somebody simply does not know, goes down there, it's innocent, it's not a, and they want to come clean. So they come and hire you.
Voluntary disclosure.
And so there's a reduction in penalties if they come forward and so forth, right?
Or none.
Or none. So if they come forward, what's the worst that can typically, well, the worst that can happen is they can pay the full shot, right?
Well, in reality, if they came forward voluntarily, California would likely want tax for the last 6 years on the RRSP, the internal earnings of the RRSP.
Right?
Yep. It would be unusual for them to go back more than 6 years for something that wasn't criminal, wasn't whatever. But they would want likely 6 years. The feds are going to want 6 years of TDF 90s filed. And they should file their 8891s for 6 years too. Right. Even though the 8891 didn't exist for 2003 and 2004, they should still file it because they came out with a form. There was you just sort of wrote a letter before.
Right.
Just wrote a letter. So that person should do that, and then if they do that, they're clean. And
so 2003 is the kind of the magic date here to go back.
Right now, today.
Yeah.
And I don't want to take away from what happens, because people like Paul Diajardi I've done radio programs with them. I don't want to take...
Who is he again?
Paul Diajardi is a Vancouver Canadian lawyer, used to work for the tax office, and he specializes in voluntary disclosures. And because he's a lawyer, he has privileged communication.
Yeah.
And his ads on television and radio all say, well, they can make your accountant tell.
Yeah.
Well, I've been doing this for 46 years. Not once have the tax office ever come and made me talk about them. I think we got 3 voluntary disclosures going in my house right now. That we do them all the time. And not to take away from Paul or anybody else out there, if there's no criminality, in my humble opinion, don't need a lawyer, because of the fees that Paul and so on charge are more than any of the penalties I've ever had assessed on my stuff. So it's...
So what you're saying is, if you want to come clean in terms of, you're worried about the disclosure issue, you should, if you can find a good CPA or somebody like yourself to work with, then that's fine, right? You don't have to...
I would say that.
You would
yes.
say that.
Yeah, I would say that, because you want somebody that knows what they're doing. And Paul and this group, for instance, and a very good group, no, nothing against them, would hire a chartered accountant or an accountant to do the work, to do the accounting work for them. They just do the legal stuff.
From the legal stuff, it's just client attorney privilege is what
that's
what
correct.
they're talking about.
So you can actually go to, if you really had a problem with privileged communication, you can go to any lawyer and you can say, I have been running an illegal bill. I've been a bootlegger. I've run a house of prostitution. You can do anything you want. You tell the lawyer that, and you say, I want this done. The lawyer can hire an accountant, and because the lawyer hires the accountant's now covered by the lawyer's privileged communication, and the paperwork can be put together. Right. So if somebody wants that, and that's true in Canada, the States, and if somebody really wants to get into that, but the facilities, the systems, are so good today that people who have a tax boogeyman back there, should be filing their tax returns. They should be bringing it up to date. I don't care if you lose half the value of your house to do it. You should do it, because if you don't do it and they catch you, you lose the whole house and you might end up with a jail sentence or something.
Well, certainly there's a lot more focus these days on it too, with this latest IRS crackdown on offshore stuff that's
Well,
going
well,
on
that's
with
all.
UBS in Switzerland.
But that's
so,
Canada too. If you
but
take
Canada's going
the Canada's right,
catching
they've
up,
got
right?
they just issued a bulletin for people that were UBS and
Yeah.
and if you've got another one, come forward. Voluntary disclosure. Well, if you come forward before we find
Yeah.
you,
Yeah.
and they're going to find them because all these companies are. I think I told you this before, but you'd have to go through. We've done 10 hours of this stuff now. I'm going to give a date. I believe I'm within 2 weeks. March 1984.
Yeah.
I was in the office of a senior vice president of the Bank of Nova Scotia.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was there, the phone rang. He took the call because it was the United States Department of the Treasury. And the United States Department of the Treasury said, while I was in the room, we want you, the Bank of Nova Scotia, to give us the details of so-and-so who has an account in the Grand Cayman Islands. And the Bank of Nova Scotia's vice president said, I can't do that, because if I did that, I would be doing a criminal act, because Grand Cayman Islands says, I can't release the name. This is bank secrecy. The Treasury Department guy said, and I didn't hear this, he told me what they said, that they were going to put a $25,000 US a day penalty against the Bank of Nova Scotia until the Bank of Nova Scotia gave the information to them. He said, well, the U.S. Treasury Department levied the fine against the Bank of Nova Scotia subsidiary in Miami Beach, Florida.
Yeah.
And when the fine got to $3,250,000 U.S., the Bank of Nova Scotia turned over the information to. Now, I did not get that from the Bank of Nova Scotia. That actually made the paper. That became public knowledge because the U.S. Treasury announced what they'd done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it wasn't private knowledge. The fact that I was in the office when it happened.
I think what you're saying, and bottom line, is that if you think you're working with institutions that's going to safeguard your affairs
Not
from
anymore.
the government tax man, whether it's the IRS or the Canadian CRA, you're mistaken. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, your records can be asked for at any point in time.
And in the Bahamas, the CIA had a trust company.
I can imagine.
And I'm trying to remember the name of it. It was Council Trust or something like that. I've got it in one of my newsletters. And all sorts of U.S. citizens were going to the Bahamas, opening up their secret bank accounts.
Yeah.
And again, when it got to be something like 1,150 people that they got, they then prosecuted all 1,150 people for having their offshore bank accounts. So you just don't know. Don't
I think
do
the
it.
issue
It's not
for
worth
the
it.
Canadians, for the most part, would you agree that for Canadians, it's just it's not an ignorance issue. It's just a not knowing issue, or they don't think they have to do it, or they don't. It's not a large enough amount. A person goes across and has, 110,000 in RSP and just doesn't think anything of it. Right?
Well, let me use another example, and this is a true thing that happened to me yesterday, and it's the kind of thing that that I had a client who is clearly a U.S. citizen and a U.S. resident, and he has a wife who is clearly a Canadian and wants nothing to do with the U.S., and they are effectively separated.
Right.
Okay, but they still have some monies, and in a Canadian. Well, I don't even care. BMO and TD Waterhouse.
Canadian banks, yeah.
They have trading securities brokers.
Yeah.
They have it was $404,000 or something of U.S. stocks.
Right.
And it wasn't until dealing with them yesterday that it suddenly twigged on me that the wife, whose tax return we've been doing for at least 7 years, has had, first of all, I didn't know she had all this money, and it's gone now because it was there for a short period of time and then was taken out and used to buy a house. Right. She has to report this on a T1135. I had no idea and never even dawned on me until I'm sitting here doing a little bit of reading, and it suddenly dawns on me that this Canadian in Canada with a large securities, U.S. securities and Canadian brokerage, has to file a T1135.